Hello, everyone. Just giving everyone a minute to get their microphones and everything sorted. There's a few people still joining in the waiting room. Thank you so much for joining us.
If you didn't join last week, or even if you did, feel free to type into the chat where you're calling from and say hello to everyone, if you want to. My name's Anne-Marie. I'm calling in from Budapest. We're the hosts.
And I'm Shannon, and I'm calling in from Dublin in Ireland. So I know we're waiting on a couple more people to join. So we just give it another minute. Just make sure you can hear us okay. And like Anne-Marie said, if there's anything that stuck out for you about the book that you want to pop into the chat whilst we're waiting for people to join, anything to get the conversation going, we've got a few points that we're going to read through ourselves. And then, like the previous week, if you were here or if you weren't, we'll just go through a few points ourselves and then we'll open it up for everyone to start discussing the second chapter. Then we have Anna from NYC, Cher from northern Minnesota in the States. Oh, poor Cher has a bad cold. Sorry about that. Horrible. There's a lot going around at the moment. So,
Yeah, I'm hearing that too.
so yeah, we'll get started, get kicked off. Anne-Marie will start leading us with some quotes that stuck out for her, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I just thought I underlined two that I thought would be nice to share, and I have a kind of little personal or semi-personal anecdote. So I'm on page 37, and I'm on the bottom half of the page. And it's all this section where he talks about identification with things, which I found very interesting. I know Shannon shared a question in the Facebook group, which we'll get to at some point as well. So I like where he says at the bottom of page 37, some economists are so attached to the notion of growth that they can't let go of that word. So they refer to recession as a time of negative growth. And this ties in with kind of the ego's need for more and always just wanting more and not being happy with just having and just wanting more. And there was a story that I thought of that I came across a few years ago online, and I just like clicked on it randomly, and it was about this it was a Czech, I think he was like the richest man in Czech Republic or something, and he had passed away unfortunately in an accident. He was in a private plane in Alaska or something. I forget the details. But what I just found interesting about the article was, I think this was just after COVID, but apparently they shared a quote that he had given during COVID times, and he'd been the owner of a company or something like this. And he said, I'm having such a, basically something like, I'm having such a huge problem during this time because I don't see, nothing is growing, and I have a real problem with that, within my company and within whatever area he was working in. And then I just was kind of comparing that, this person had this problem with the economy is not going good and things aren't growing, but ultimately everyone meets their end, right? And little did that person know that 1 year later or something, he would have to deal with the ultimate, opposition to growth, which is complete ending of everything. So I don't know. I just found this story quite, it just very much resonated with me. And I'll just share one more. So the other thing that and again, so much great stuff in this chapter, really. The other thing that resonated with me was on page 56, when he talks about this peace, the peace that passes all understanding. And he has this he talks about, you know, some people, there are accounts of people who experienced an emerging new dimension of consciousness as a result of tragic loss at some point in their lives, and some lost all their possessions, others their children or spouse, their social position, reputation, or physical abilities. And then a bit lower down, he says, then suddenly and inexplicably, the anguish or intense fear they initially felt gave way to a sacred sense of presence, a deep peace and serenity, and complete freedom from fear. This phenomenon must have been familiar to St. Paul, who used the expression, the peace of God, which passeth all understanding. Um, and yeah, there's a few things that resonate with me from that. Like I don't know if I've experienced anyone personally, but I have heard like friends talk about meeting people that have just like lost their entire families in like war-torn countries, and these people just resonate that, like they feel when they're in these people's presence, like just a sense of like complete peace, which obviously doesn't happen to everyone. And there's like one personal thing I notice sometimes in the city I live in. I make sandwiches for homeless people. I try to do it a little bit regularly. And, you know, often these are people with kind of very little. I don't know their specific circumstances, every one of them. But, you know, like sometimes I really feel something in that interaction from some of these people. I feel like these are people that they're homeless, they've lost everything, but I feel like a strong sense of presence. I got it a few weeks ago when I was giving sandwiches, and I came across this man. He was completely blind, and you know, I just felt like a strong sense of stillness when I like spoke to him, and I was like, hey, can I give you a sandwich? And he said yes. So I don't know, that's something that I have experienced to some degree with people who, that again, I can only assume have very little. So those were my 2 points. So feel free to comment about any of them in the
Yeah,
chat, and
if
I'll just hand you.
yeah, if anyone has any bits that they want to come in about anything that Anne-Marie said there, any stories that they want to share that resonate with those points that she brought up, please do. Now's the time. It'd be great to hear if you've met anyone who seems to have attained that level of peace, or anything else. Does anyone want to join? You can use the hands up, or you can just unmute as well.
Hi,
Hi, Sharon, how are you?
I'm doing good. I had a hard time getting on Zoom and I apologize for interrupting. Did you guys
Okay.
start late?
Don't worry at all.
We're so far away from each other, but sometimes I think I've got it down now. But anyway, I apologize. And the one thing that I was going to say about that I read was so many things resonated with me, not that I'm doing them, but I'm doing the opposite, the thing that I shouldn't do, like identifying too much with certain things,
Mhm.
right? One of the things for me, because I am 67, I've been into spirituality all my life, but when I see a new like wrinkle or something like that, I'm like, oh my God, right? And that's not at all what it's about, because we're a spiritual being in a physical body. And so some little things that I notice and I say, oh, I do that and I need to work on that. So some things I understand, and then I find out I really don't understand. And if I've even learned 1%, I have 1,000,000% more to learn. So it kind of is humbling at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely concur with that. I'm in my sort of mid-30s now, and I'm starting to get the wrinkles. And do
You
you know,
look beautiful.
oh, thank you. But like the first ones at the beginning of the year, when I started to notice like you do get very attached to your physical appearance, or to just, I guess it's a thing of change as well, and accepting change. And But yeah, I can completely relate, because then you've got one half of your brain that's very much, geared into the, oh, well, I'm a spiritual being and I shouldn't be thinking about these things and I need to let go and I need to do all of those practices. But then there is that voice, like Eckhart was saying, the
That ego,
voice.
right?
Yeah.
That's
And it's so
definitely
hard to
ego.
quieten it down sometimes. So I really recognize that in myself.
I do too, and I recognize it, and I have too much stuff. So I'm trying to there's so many books and things that I really love that are almost like reference books, like Eckhart's books. And so I'm trying to give what I can, except for sentimental pictures and things like that, to somebody who could use them and things like that, or repurpose them or something. I have too much stuff.
Yeah.
It's a burden.
It is a burden, especially like when you have to move or anything. I discovered I moved from London back to Ireland about 6 years ago now. And I just realized then, oh my goodness, it was just such a struggle with the stuff. And you just ask yourself, why have I done this?
Yes. And I
Well,
wouldn't even know if I lost a box.
yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And we also have Diana wants to say something.
Hi.
Am I good now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Well, listen, I can certainly appreciate about the talk about too much stuff because I recently downsized and moved from one city to another, and the house that we're in now is half the size. So I can't tell you how freeing that was. Stressful, but also freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in any event, this whole chapter it is just so loaded with stuff, honestly. That and I can honestly see myself on every single page. I'm such a good example. I will always be a good example, let me tell you. But listen, I'm gonna if I can bring us back to page 34, and at the very bottom and the middle of the last paragraph. He talks about the content you identify is conditioned with your environment, your upbringing, and surrounding culture. Whether a child is rich or poor, whether a toy is a piece of wood shaped like an animal or a sophisticated electronic gadget, makes no difference as far as the suffering caused by its loss is concerned. And I just love this because it's just an example of why the story doesn't matter. People talk about these tremendous big losses and they give amounts. And then, but yet, someone could talk about a loss of a small handmade toy, but the suffering is the same. And that's the message that Eckhart keeps trying to get across to people, is that the story doesn't matter. It's that I remember I actually had somebody say to me she was in absolute distress, and her son was in a relationship with someone she didn't want him in a relationship with, and she was suffering, mind-made suffering. And she said to me, Diana, you will never know you'll never suffer as much as me because you do not have a son. That was her thoughts. And I'm just thinking, and I just looked at her. I didn't say anything. And she looked at me, no. And I said, no. I said, it doesn't matter if I don't have a son or not, because there is no measurement of suffering. Who suffers more than somebody else?
Yeah, I was talking about this recently with Anne-Marie, actually. We were talking about this, and the thing of your greatest day and your worst day, they're different for everyone, but the suffering and the joy that you feel are the greatest suffering and joy that you've experienced. So they are, exactly comparable to everyone else's, and you've hit the nail on the head there. So it's just an interesting thing, and I guess from a point of compassion, it's great to remember that as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That, nobody and that's also I see it as well in some of my family members, in that I have one family member who believes that she suffers more than any of us. And that in itself creates her more suffering. but she just really believes that, oh no, I am suffering so much. But but that person is so unconscious that you can't guide them,
Yeah.
because if I said anything different, then that would be very threatening to her, because that is her identity, right? And that's why it's so hard for us to try to reason with people, because we feel that we're so reasonable and trying to get them to feel better or whatever, but really it's threatening them, because we're taking away their identity, that I suffer the most.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And that's really important to remember. It's putting the identity in things and in experiences and in all these other things than yourself,
Yes.
exactly what Eckhart was saying.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
sharing.
Yep.
Does anyone else want to share anything at the moment? It's okay if you don't.
Hi.
Oh, hi, Anna.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I wanted to say that in Buddhism that concept is called the second arrow. Like the suffering, the absolutely optional suffering that we cause to ourselves by suffering about suffering. Like it's bad enough, say, that you, I don't know, got fired. It's bad enough, right? But then everything on top of you could be like, oh, I'm such, a failure, what people would think, how I'm gonna do this now, how, all the baggage you left with actually does way more damage to your life than or any injury, like any loss is actually things are more or less in balance. So any loss of circumstance or object or even anything like creates new room just in life. But the suffering that we bring ourselves, the optional part, usually that one is like more, that one is tends to be chronic, whereas the suffering done to us by life is like acute. Something happens to you, like sucks. But so that's the acute part. But the chronic suffering is what we the identification, if Eckhart would say, or like the constant dwelling on it, and just like we weave a whole other situation on top of the original one. So as far as the lady with the son goes, should be, we could, it's so easy to say from the side to a stranger who doesn't know, like, oh, like some people have children who are not even interested in anyone at all, and they will never have any, like can't have a relationship, are deaf or mute or disabled, and they will never have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Be happy that you see someone seeing someone at all, But of course, that's a hypothetical situation. God forbid, tomorrow I will be in her situation. I'll remember this conversation. God forbid. So I think being compassionate to others is like a nice guideline for everyone, no matter where you are in your understanding of these mechanics,
Definitely. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's a great thing to remember as well. I know the story about the second arrow, and it's something that we do to ourselves all the time, making ourselves suffer twice. We have
sometimes Eckhart would say that it's because we, the things that the sufferings that life gives to us, they're too impersonal. It could happen to anyone, and they do. But our own suffering, because it's very personal, very identity, and we love to create ourselves out of our suffering. Because so that's it. But and sometimes I even wonder, maybe that's like a thing we're supposed to, like I had earlier in the book, he was talking about the evolution of things coming out on land, and chapter 1, and I was just even like, maybe we're meant to be going through all these ego sufferings because we develop it very, like, as mama of children, I know how robustly the ego development goes. Like, they're like, everything is created for that reason. I think it's just I don't think we should worry about it as much as even Eckhart suggests. Like, it's I think it's a stage. It's like a gestation, except now outside of our mama in reality, but it's still gestation.
Yeah, that's very true though. And, something, especially to do with evolution, at some stage, this probably would have helped us to survive. It's like the predisposition of the brain towards negativity is there because it helped us survive, thousands of years ago. But now it's not a very useful thing. So it's definitely important to remember that, and that these things probably were useful at one stage, and now it's our next sort of
Well,
stage.
and the people with no ego completely could also be very dangerous. As the young lady who gives out sandwiches, I know some transient homeless people too. Sometimes it's good a little sanity in
Mhm.
form of ego has never hurt nobody, because sometimes the people who are truly very open and enlightened, you see them on one day, you catch them on a bad day, and they're really dangerous. So I feel like I'm very protective of our state of mind. I even think that, who am I to choose the person who wants to study and come to an Eckhart Tolle book club and meditate and exercise? Who am I to prefer her over the one who wants to lay in bed
Mm,
scrolling through stuff and just,
mm,
and like, because, it's like, it's still a striving, it's still an ego desire to be better and to be,
mhm.
studying something. It's still a trap. I
Yeah,
think just so far, the only guidepost I find is just be compassionate and
yeah.
sweet to
That's
yourself, number one.
Thank
That's it. End of rant.
you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
We also have a comment in the chat from Cher about page 41. Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. This statement struck me. I closed the book and sat in stillness with it, then started laughing, which is always a good sign, they say. I've been managing a diagnosis of multiple sclerosis since 1999 when I was 38 years old. Spent so much of my life flat in bed, and here I am with a cold, flat in bed again. Perfect timing to be still with this book. Thank you so much for sharing that. And anything else in there? Nope, that's everything from the chat. Thank you so much for sharing that. Everyone shared such beautiful things there. Something that I wanted to bring up around the discussion of labels that he goes into and this labeling, because it's something that I struggle with, this need in society to label everything. Like, for instance, recently with pronouns, I don't mind what other people want to call themselves, but like in my work, they want me to put a pronoun beside my name. And I really struggle with that because I was having this sort of, I guess, identity crisis of what is my pronoun? And I just felt like I didn't want to call myself a she and a her, but I didn't feel like a they and an them. And almost when you're not putting the pronouns now, it's like making a statement. So it just left me in this position of feeling very anxious and not wanting to label myself, which is kind of along the lines of what Eckhart's saying, that we should be sort of moving away from this attraction to labeling everything. So that was something that really struck me about that. He said the quicker you are in attaching verbal or mental labels to things, people, or situations, the more shallow and lifeless your reality becomes, and the more deadened you become to reality, the miracle of life that continuously unfolds within and around you. In this way, cleverness may be gained, but wisdom is lost, and so are joy, love, creativity, and aliveness. So that was just something that really stuck out for me, that this incessant sort of need to put everything in boxes as a way of making order of the world and making sense of the world that's around today. But is there anything anyone would like to say in response to that, or any other points that people would like to bring up? Oh, yes, Sharon?
Well, I was thinking about that, what you said, and there's not a really good way because I don't want to offend other people and I'd like to be compassionate, but sometimes it's very confusing. And I don't mind if somebody says the wrong pronoun by accident to me. I would, I won't even correct them unless they keep,
Yeah.
doing it. And then I would do it like one-on-one and say, well, because why do I have to be so connected to that? Why do we have to why couldn't we use a number? But then we would get the numbers
Yeah.
and each one of us would have to have our own number and it would be billions and billions of them.
Yeah.
So I don't even have a good solution for that
Yeah.
other than to say, I don't know. I really don't know. That's a really good question. I'm gonna have to think about that. I hope somebody else might have some input that would straighten that one out.
I think it's just a difficult one. And like I said, like I have no problem with calling other people whatever they want. It was just like me
either.
myself. I was like, what do I even say?
Oh, you're a guru. There you are. You're a reluctant guru.
But I think this emphasis on pronouns and people again needing to form, like, you know, there's so many of these pronouns now, and I guess like in one way, like, you know, it's a good indication that society is like a bit more open or whatever. But yeah, I think again, like when you are if you are the person that like gets so offended that again, it's not like judgment or anything on anyone, right? But if you are going to be very offended because somebody gives you the wrong pronoun or something, it's that you're like very attached to the way you see yourself, right? It's all
Right.
go.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good
I honestly think it's gonna be a fad, you guys. It's like a fad. Don't agree with me or disagree. Just mark my word. By the time in like 20 years from now, it's gonna be like, oh God, you know, those times.
Yes.
Still evolve. So just sit tight.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was the voice in the head, because I came across the study like a good few years ago. I've spoken to Anne-Marie about this before. There's a study or a few studies, but I got one of them here by the psychologist Russell Hulbert. And according to his study, actually only 30 to 50% of people have an internal monologue. Now, I was reading into the study and it was sort of saying it's, you know, that's specifically about words that people hear in their head. And it's a lot of what Eckhart is talking about, this sort of voice that you have in your head. So if we were to take this as verbatim, which is debatable in its own way, but if only 30 to 50% actually have a voice in their head, and other people might have images or whatever, I just wanted to throw that out there as something to discuss. What do people think of that? And how do they deal with those things if they don't have a voice?
No, it seems incredible to me, because if our ego is our voice, you're right, people could hear them in pictures and music and whatever, but there's still that, unless I've never met anybody that didn't have some of it. I've always had the voice in my head, and it's very calm, except sometimes. I don't know. I hope somebody else has some good input on that. Like, she seems to have a good grasp. I like her practical approach.
Yeah, it is nice to have different approaches as well, and to throw these questions out there. Diana wants to say something as well.
Oh, good.
Well, you know, that survey, 30 to 50%, only 30 to 50% of the people know they have a voice in their head.
That's a great point.
That's good.
100% of the people have a voice in their head. Only 30 to 50% know they have it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. And like, so if they don't know that they have it, like, oh my goodness, imagine the control that voice has.
Yeah, well, if you know, that is the first glimpse of awareness. The first glimpse of awareness is knowing the voice in your head is not who you are. But so who, you know, that is Eckhart's description of your first glimpse of awareness back in the last chapter. So those are the people who are still so unconscious, so caught up. The other 50 to 70% or so still caught up in their attachment to thinking, that they don't even know that their mind's not quiet.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's like blowing my mind to think about that.
It's worse than you suspected, Shannon.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering whether people would be more like, I don't know, would they be more relaxed if they don't have that separation, you know?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
why the world's as mad as it is.
That's
Yeah.
a good point. Thank you so much.
If everybody could just wake up and it would be a new earth.
Yeah. That's the dream.
Yeah, it is.
You know, I just wanted to kind of maybe even go back to some comments about labeling.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes you get to a point of you know, the reason why Eckhart doesn't want people to start labeling things, because it becomes a mental concept in our head. And especially of people who are not who are labeling people that perhaps like stupid or dumb or rude or just whatever. So labeling that person is so dangerous to do that, because then we are more easily to perpetuate, to be the perpetrator of them. Well, let's just forget about them. They're just so stupid. So then, you know what, that just kind of makes us cling onto our own unconsciousness. It really holds on to unconsciousness and our own unconscious. So we're just exactly like them. You know, whatever's in them is also in us, is what he's saying. So that's why labels are just so dangerous, because it just it gives us a mental concept of it, and it's only our own concept only. And sometimes people try to get other people to join in. Well, isn't that person just rude, or just, you know, and you know, if you're in an office environment, I'm retired now, so I don't have to participate in that kind of stuff or be, you know, subjected to that kind of stuff. But you know, that's what happens in like little gossipy circles and stuff like that, and the unconsciousness just perpetuates itself.
It's
Yeah,
definitely this othering as well, like this labeling. It's
it is
it's a differentiation. It's me, and then this othering of
the
other people.
others.
Yeah.
That's right. I mean, it's dividing and separating. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you. We don't have too long left now. We've got about 6-7 minutes left. So does anyone else want to bring up any points that really resonated with them, or anything they'd like to discuss? And the thing I put in Facebook, a lot of people reacted to it. They didn't respond. So maybe I'll throw that out there as well. Is there anything, any item or anything that you feel like you attach yourself to, your identity to, that you'd like to share with us?
I don't think for me that, well, I don't know. That question is kind of a bit like complicated, I think, for me personally, because like, for example, you know, like things, like I'm not hugely obsessed with things. I'm definitely not into designer labels. I see totally through the marketing of a lot from consumer society. But then I don't know. Yeah, maybe I think, yeah, losing things, if I lose something that I own, like it can be like still frustrating, right? Like there's not like a complete and yeah, I mean, I think if I think I would still get over it, right? But if like the story of the lost ring, I think this is a lovely story. And yeah, like I mean, I think it's still frustrating if I lose something of high monetary value, because I still have some like association, like, oh, I worked this hard to get that and it was like quite expensive. But like, you know, of course there's an awareness there. There's an awareness that that something like that would frustrate me.
Yeah. It's interesting actually
This-
with the losing things, because I, you know, would be sort of that ADHD type where I often misplace things, lose things. And when I was younger, I used to lose expensive things like a lot. And it kind of, the first couple of times it happened, it was very devastating and I was really upset. But then because it was happening so frequently, I kind of got to a stage with it where now if I lose something, I'm kind of like, oh well, it's gone now. And I get over it quite quickly. So in a way, like my sort of, I don't know, I guess my lack of attention to where I place things helps me in a way not be so associated with the things when I'm losing them.
Someone almost said something there.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it, Sharon.
Oh, okay. Well, when you said that, I am ADD. I don't have the hyper part, but I'm not realizing what I'm doing a lot of times. So I'm thinking and you know, whatever. And I lose things, and I lost things many, many times, especially when I was younger, but even when I was older. And I had to do that too. And sometimes, like, I will not buy an expensive pair of sunglasses or anything like that because I'm just going to lose them or break them. So I kind of did, you're right, realizing that you kind of get used to it and it doesn't matter as much. I used to be devastated, not to mention that, you know, if it was something from my parents, they'd be like, how did you do that?
Mm,
And I'm like, I think it went into another dimension.
yeah.
Right?
The
And
dimension
they're
with
like,
the odd
okay.
socks, you
Yeah.
know.
But yeah, that's a big one. We are attached to things because we learn that when we're children,
Mm, yeah, exactly.
most of us.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
You're
And
welcome. Thank you.
thank you. And Diana wants to say something as well.
Yeah. Am I on?
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
Technology isn't my forte, I can tell you that. Let me tell
You're
you.
doing great.
So I just wanted to go back to one of my favorite little sutras that someone had brought up earlier on page 40 about the one thing we do know, life will give you whatever experience is the most helpful for your evolution of consciousness. This is the premise of everything happens for a reason.
Mm.
You know, so many people think that it's kind of it's new age kind of saying that some people can get lost. Well, everything happens for a reason. And so many people get stuck on the story. Well, this story happened because I needed to learn this, that, or the whatever. But everything happens for a reason is exactly for that sutra there, is to bring us back to the divine within ourselves.
Mm.
I just wanted to kind of add that in that because that was a moment of my life that I had to kind of figure that out. Like, what exactly does that mean? That I needed to do this, and this things need to happen. No, it gets back to the suffering. That, you know, it's, you know, the suffering that we caused ourselves, our reaction to a certain situation. That is the reason everything happens. If something happens for a reason, it's to bring us back to the divine. Because when anything ever happens, we either go deeper into darkness or we bring in the light of consciousness. That's what whole sutra is about.
Yeah,
And this could be,
thank you for sharing that, because that's really important. And I do think you're right. We were looking for meaning and the reason behind things, but the true reason is really what you just said there, is to bring us back to the divine and bring
the
us
divine. That's right. It isn't the story at all. And that's when Eckhart talks about, you know, drop the story. When we drop the horrific story, what do we have left? What do we all have in common? Is letting go of suffering.
Thank you so much. And I think that's a lovely point for us to end on tonight. So thank you so much for joining us and for sharing and being so honest and open with us. It's been really lovely. And looking forward to next week, and keep on posting in the Facebook group. And thank you again.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was very lovely.
Bye, everyone.
Take care,
Bye.
everyone. Thank you so much.